appreciate your time, so we'll get into something that's even more interesting, sewer. Everyone's most interesting subject. So we do have a sewer system collection or sewer collection system master plan that we have started on. It was by schedule. You do those updates every 5 years, and we've actually already begun that update of the entire system. But we've had we're a little bit a victim of our own success in that the development rate is picking up quickly, and so it really necessitated us to get ahead of that full system study and look at the east side, because we've got some key parts of the city that are developing quickly, and we want to make sure that we stay ahead of that development with sewer capacity. So before I jump in, I'm going to use some terms that not everyone probably uses every day. Gravity trunk main really so when the sewer leaves your house, it goes into a sewer by gravity. It collects that. Usually that's an 8-inch pipe that flows into a bigger pipe. And then eventually there's main arteries that take the sewer to the plant. Those are typically in the range of at least 24 inches to 30 inches in size for Louisville. So when I talk about gravity trunk main, I'm talking about those big mains that are the main arteries. Lift station, you've heard the phrase, poop doesn't flow uphill. It actually does, but it takes pumps. So a lift station is just a pump station. So it flows in the gravity into the lift station, and then that pumps it through a force main, which is just a pipe where we force it to go uphill, so it's under pressure.
I'm beginning to regret my previous.
So the other term is sewer surcharge, and that's a scenario where we have a gravity main that you can see in the graphic here. The blue is the size of the pipe, and that's how full the pipe is. When we slightly exceed the capacity of the pipe, it starts to fill up the manholes. It's not overflowing, but it's starting to fill those manholes, and that's what we call a sewer surcharge. So a little background, like I mentioned, we've done some, we're already underway on the new system master plan. Some previous master plans, 2011 and 2018, had different strategies for conveying sewer from the east side of Louisville. So the main part of that 2011 plan was 4 lift stations, all pumping into one force main. While technically that can be done, from an operation standpoint, it's kind of a nightmare because those pumps kind of have to take turns and they fight each other. So it takes some logistics to make that work. That has now shifted to a different strategy, which is the midway lift station. We won't have multiple lift stations pumping into one force main anymore. As Kelly mentioned earlier, the ultimate solution to this is the midway lift station and force main to divert flow. That is the lift station itself is 90% complete. The force main route assumed it would go through Leela. We've now determined that's either not possible or would be so hard we don't have the time to get that approval done. And then because it was planned to go through an Upper Trinity utility corridor, and we've now learned that they have exclusive access to that corridor. So not likely to be able to get through there. As I said, we were going to evaluate all of this with the 24 collection system master plan. Some land use changes have happened, which have necessitated all this. In addition to the high rate of development, there were some changes in residential density as well. So more people results in more sewer flow. And then, so the way I'm going to go through this is I'm just going to show you the different sections of pipe and kind of the results, what we studied. What we looked at is, as I mentioned, gravity trunk mains, lift stations, and force mains. It really encompasses the capacity of the main parts of our system. We looked at current capacity and then build out capacity in those areas. So it's not a full city study, it's just that east side. Point out the high growth areas. You can see Old Town over by Midway, and then up by the lake and far east Louisville. I've indicated some dates where we expect some of these developments to start coming online, and that's key for us because I don't care that they're under construction. What I care about is when do people start moving in and flushing toilets. So Ohala is expected in summer of 26, and then over by Midway, we're going to have some starting to come on spring and fall of 25. Winter of 26 is when we expect the first phase of Pier 121 to start coming online. This far eastern development, after talking with some of the developers out there, we're probably outside the 10-year window. Keeping in mind that can change, but one of the things that we would like to study that's not part of this, but we will want to study more in depth is with the master plan is, do we want to let that sewer dictate the density in that area? Because it goes right through a golf course. So if we have to parallel that sewer to add capacity, it's going to be really, really difficult. So to go through as I mentioned, I'll go through the results of each section. So this is the section that we looked at first, the far east, gravity trunk main. No improvements warranted at this time, but again, it's outside. Because it's outside, we feel like that development is outside the 10-year window. Definitely want to look at it though, because there's one tract that's I think around 200 acres that's zoned multifamily, so that can definitely impact the sewer system. Also we looked at the lift station and force main here. So the way it works, sewer flows down this line into a force main and then is pumped up to this point into another gravity main, which is the next section that we looked at. Holford's Prairie trunk main, no improvements warranted there. So I'm all good news today, right? Midway branch east, another gravity trunk main. It's what collects it from the north up by the lake. No improvements are warranted there. It does have capacity. Until we get to the Midway branch west and Lower Elm trunk main. So this is where these two sewers converge, all the way down to the Timber Creek lift station. We are currently surcharging on that line a little bit in peak flows. It does have capacity to accommodate the Ohala development that's coming online soon, but does not have capacity to build out. So we're going to have to do something to address that. In addition to the capacity issue, I think we've had a couple of collapses on that gravity main. And that's the latest one. Whenever the contractor got out there and dug that up, if you look inside the pipe, there's some definite condition issues that will need to be addressed. Given that this section of sewer line was all installed at the same time, that could be a very, very costly thing. So it's likely, and the whole thing's likely in poor condition. We know some of it is. Does someone have a question? Okay. We'll need to inspect that before we really make the call. What I'm going to give you later is worst case scenario. We have not inspected it yet. It's about $600,000 to video it because you have to buy a pass pump because it has so much flow on it to be able to see the inside of that pipe. And then we look at the Timber Creek lift station, and then it has two force mains that flow out of it, a 36-inch and a 24-inch. And those pump the flow all the way to the wastewater plant. The lift station will not have build-out capacity. Would need to be expanded. The force main capacity is sufficient. However, the 24-inch is in poor condition. We've had a couple of failures on that, and I think it's around 50 years old. So it's getting to the end of life. So just kind of put it to pull all that together, we have about 20,000 linear feet of gravity trunk main that's undersized. The Timber Creek lift station is undersized. The 24-inch force main's in poor condition. And we need a gravity sewer to serve the east side of Old Town, and that will provide sewer for that whole side. And what I didn't mention is I don't have on my slide here is also the condition of the gravity sewer, the 30-inch gravity sewer. So main challenges, as always, are funding and time, because we're talking about a lot of money. and I'll talk about that in a minute, but the time scenario is because we have this elevated rate of development, and we need to stay ahead of them. So the game plan, as Kelly mentioned earlier, is to divert the flow. So where the sewers converge here, we will intercept it here, Midway lift station, divert that flow directly to the plant. That creates that alleviates that capacity problem on the gravity sewer, also alleviates the capacity problem in Timber Creek lift station. The other thing it does is it makes it where we don't need that 24-inch force main anymore. So we will not have to pay the money to replace it. However, even though we've diverted a lot of flow from that 30-inch gravity main, we will probably need to do some extensive work to it, if not replace the whole thing. And I'll talk about the cost on that in just a second. So, and then again, we would need to construct the Old Town gravity sewer, which is actually under design already. The developer is designing that line, and they're actually going to construct it. They're going to perform the work to construct it. So that's in process. The route for the force main as we divert the flow, we've already done a route study on that. So routes 4 and 5, there was 5 possible routes that the engineer determined. Routes 4 and 5 were determined to be not viable. Number 5 has us going down Midway Road. There's just too many utilities in there. There's just not room to fit it in. And then there's also on Route 4, there's a physical barrier that would be very difficult to get past. So those 2 routes were kind of tossed out. Routes 1, 2, and 3 were evaluated from an economic standpoint. And so Route 1 uses the corporate drive right away, and that has some pretty significant advantages for us. Number 1, it only has 8 easements that we would still need to acquire. So based on, because we have to acquire less easements, it not only makes it cheaper, but it makes it quite a bit faster, because as David Salmon will tell you, easement acquisition is one of the things that really makes these projects hard. So then we get to project funding and schedule. So we have this laid out on when we will need the money to accomplish our goals to stay ahead of the development. Midway Lift Station, about $12.5 million. We need that right now. As mentioned earlier, it's 90% designed. We could finish that design up and get it bid out. We need to do that because of the lead time on the equipment. To stay on schedule. Midway force main, we need to a little over $2.5 million, get design on that started. And then we would actually construct it in 24, 25, probably leaning into 25, 26. And so this funding for construction of that is spread over 2 years. And then the Lower Elm gravity main, that's a $34 million project. That's assuming we have to replace the whole thing. That's worst case scenario. I always want to give you the bad news first and then come back from there. But if we have to replace the whole thing, that's what it would cost. And so then we've reprioritized some projects and moved some money around so to try to kind of lower the impact on our financial situation. So the Midway lift station and force main already had $3.8 million in that project available to spend. Timber Creek force main, a little less than $1.3 million. That project, that was the 24-inch force main that we don't need to replace anymore. And then Castle Hills gravity sewer, $500,000. That's a project that we don't need, at least in the near future. And then also we have some reimbursements for the utility relocations from TxDOT, $3.3 million that we expect we'll get in 24, 25. And then down here is another $9.5 million we expect to get in 26, 27. There's $9.5 million for the Castle Hills lift station, force main, and gravity sewer in 25, 26 that was programmed into the capital program that we, through this study, have determined we're not going to need to build those projects. And then another $4 million in 26, 27. So you can see at the bottom line is kind of our funding needs to accomplish this. And I'll turn it over to Gina to tell us how we're going to do that.
Thanks. So I did want to talk about this for 3 different reasons, but one of them is that added about $36 million to our utility fund expenditures over the next 4 years. And we are time constrained, as he said, development's coming in, it's already in some cases and being built, so we really can't spread that out over 10 years to make it nice and easy on our rates. So when you look at this chart, the top purple line has the total amount system-wide that we need every year. So his chart just talked about this area. This one shows system-wide, so we're looking at 28 million in the current fiscal year we're in right now, 38 million, 32, 20 million, and another 19 million. Aaron talked about the 3.3 million and the 9.5 million. Those are reimbursements from TxDOT for our I-35 utilities that we relocated, and they're going to pay us back for them. So we were able to take those off that total cost. And then you see the bottom 2 lines, the 11,679 is what we estimate right now we're going to need in cash. And then the bonds are below in the darker purple, so 16.3 million is what we plan to issue this year in bonds. So one thing to learn from this is that at mid-year you're going to see Ashley's going to do the mid-year report for you, and you will see a fairly large supplemental increase to utility fund for a transfer to capital to pay for the needed infrastructure this year, likely in the range of $7 million, which is a huge increase in cash. The bonds will probably progress just as we had planned, so that won't be a change this year. The second thing to note is that this adding 36 million over the next 4 years is probably going to have an impact on your rate. We've done a rate study. Dave Erb is currently working with Chris Eckroot with NuGen on that rate study, and he's going to give him all the updated information. But if you'll remember, we had a 5.4% increase in utility rates scheduled for this budget year. So when we're going into the year, that's kind of what we had in mind. I would expect that to see that change at least a little bit, because we have 14 million in fund balance right now that we will throw at this and try to help alleviate it with cash. But it's a lot of money in a short amount of time. So I just want you to be prepared that that rate increase that you thought was coming may be changed a little bit. So as soon as we have that, we'll talk about that at budget workshop. And the last thing I wanted to say is whenever we set our goals for you every year, we talk about a 50-50 kind of where we really want to be cash and bonds and how we were trying to get there. And you can see from here where we were at about 5 million this year before we changed it to 11.6. We were at 5, and we were trying to bump that up slowly to get to 6, 7 million, 8 million for what we're funding out of cash. Here, whenever your overall needs next year are 38 million, we can't fund 19 million in cash. So that 50-50 split is going to be delayed for the next couple of years at least. We'll still be adding to our cash funding, but the rate of increase on the actual expenditures is so much in such a short amount of time that that's not going to be possible for the next couple of years. So I wanted to give you a heads up on those 3 items before we get into budget. We'll have much more information and more specific information at budget workshop, but I wanted you to have that in the back of your mind as you're kind of going into that budget season.